Thank you all for fasting. Thank you for the prayers. Thank you for making this an extraordinary, beneficial Ramadan to us all. I am not able to fast as I used to fast because of my health condition. So today and tomorrow, we are feeding 2,000 people with a meal. And I want to thank Sister Kamala for allowing us to use foodies and how to eat to live to bring 2,000 meals to people that I pray will find it a delicious, delectable treat.
Last year, the minister called me, reached out to me, and I humbly accepted his request to feed 1,000 people during the month of Ramadan. Last year, as this year also, he was not able to fast due to health conditions. And so feeding 1,000 people was his giving back into Ramadan. So this year he called me again on my cell phone and said, "Sister, I would like for you to feed 2,000 people." Of course, I took the challenge. So we'll be feeding 1,000 out of the Foodie Spot restaurant and 1,000 out of Let's Eat to Live in a 2-day time frame, Saturday and Sunday again. As we try to follow the instruction of Honorable Minister Farrakhan and his request, we want to make sure that our people receive a hot meal as he requested, a hot meal. So we're providing them herb-baked chicken, vegetable basmati rice, and cabbage medley. You know, it's a pretty general meal that can sit in anybody's stomach. This year, I'm able to reach out to Sister Captain Alice, who is the regional captain here in Chicago, and she appointed 8 sisters, 4 at Eat to Live and 4 at the Foodie Spot. And we're at Let's Eat to Live restaurant, as you can see. And this is the food that we're giving. We're giving chicken, cabbage, and vegetable rice. All right, we doing it. We're on a mission. But the Captain Dwayne told me, just prepare the food. He got this.
But when we got the call, man, we went to work immediately.
He say he be where the shooters be. I be where the shooters be. Trenches ain't nothing new to me, that's the best place to recruit for me. Sometimes I move with 20 men, sometimes it's only 2 or 3. You thought I was just talking, pulled up on them, had the fruit with me. I see clout chasing activists, phony politicians, crooked police, word, God is my witness. He said, why it seem like the violence just won't stop, they pay attention. The system designed to work this way, crime pays, it's a business.
The young brothers went out, let the people know that we were coming. They had actually scouted out the best places to go and what buildings to go into in the projects. We had brothers on 79th and Cottage Grove who filled up for all of the intersections. But they knew what they were gonna do because we mapped it out, we planned it out. Those who are considered leaders in the community, our young brothers, our intelligent 20-year-old brother, 30-year-old brothers, who have men following them, but have mad respect for the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the nation. We contacted those brothers and let them know that we were coming, and they walked with us.
Tell them what we doing. Man, we giving out free food, man. We feeding the homeless right here on 71st and Jeffrey. We started on 71st and Merle. Thanks to Big Bro. We passing out this food, helping our people as a black community standing as one.
Come on,
we got
what
the
we
golden
pushing,
child.
man? What we pushing,
man? Pushing unity and peace, man. We got Big Bro right here in the trenches, really though.
Yes, sir.
For sure.
You know, man.
You know.
Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam, man. That's who all this from.
They walked with us. They called the people out of the buildings. They let the people know in advance that we were coming. And it was such a spectacle. It was so beautiful. The women came and they ate the food right there, brother. Some came back more than once. Can I get another one for my brother? for my sister, we didn't deny the people, man. We gave the people what they asked for. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has some young soldiers. He has soldiers in the mosque who have been soldiering the Final Call newspaper and have gone to places where one brother told us Saturday, he said, you know, the police can't come around here. He said, my enemies, my opposition will shoot at me, even when the police are around. But they won't do it when the FOI is here. Young brother said that to us. And he wanted us to thank the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for sending the FOI. But the young soldiers in the mosque, we were able to communicate with them and tell them to go and let the people know that we were coming with the meals that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan desired to feed 2,000 people. We're coming to O Block, where no one feels safe going. We're going into the Wentworth Gardens, where we took some of the young juniors and they got the shock of seeing how some people live. And we weren't able to hit all of the areas, but the areas that we went to, they were so appreciative because our words were, this is a gift from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. Many of the people said, thank the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Thank Brother Farrakhan. How is he doing? How's his health? Man, he's a bad man. Brother, they loved the minister. The sisters wanted to take pictures with us. The brothers wanted to take pictures, but many of them said, thank the minister. Give the minister our love and the greetings.
I appreciate you, Minister Farrakhan. Man, we love you. Man, we trying to get you in office somewhere, man. We need you to be.
If you talk to him, he got me on camera. Minister Farrakhan, you are one of my best. I promise you that, bro.
Praise be to Allah.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother. And it was so powerful for us because we got to see how much they loved our man and the love that they showed us. It was really something.
So we're here at Lincoln United Methodist Church in Pilsen, also Healthy Hood Chicago organization, as well as Trap House Chicago and Canvas, different organizations from the Black and Brown community here in the heart of the Mexican community in Pilsen, where the pastor is Sister Reverend Emma Lozano and her husband Slim Coleman, as well as now their daughter, Sister Tanya Lozano, who is taking up the mantle of leading the youth. And this is a really historic church where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has spoken and closed out his 2015 tour prior to the Justice or Else March in Washington, D.C. And we're here today during Eid at the end of Ramadan on behalf of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in his desire to help feed 2,000 people from the community. And this was one of the parts of the community, our Mexican family, that he wanted to make sure that we fed. And they were so wonderful in receiving the food and anticipating the gift of food from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, also from the Let's Eat to Live Cafe that they were all very excited about. So it's just beautiful to see the spirit of unity, to see the spirit of not only spiritual unity, but economic and social movement of Black and Brown people, young people, as you can hear and see, coming together to try to do something to better the condition of our community, inspired by the work of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
We're doing this for a man who has shown his love to the people, shown his love to his community, the Muslims. The act of delivering or transferring those meals from our hands to the hands of our people is really an expiation for our sins. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan gave us the assignment, but because we went out and fulfilled the assignment, the blessing or the expiation of sins and the mercy that Allah would show was transferred over to us. And I believe the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan knew that.
As we go through this journey as believers and our blessings, which comes from Allah through our hard work, I just want to thank the Honorable Louis Farrakhan, sincerely thank him for always considering our people, you know. But a little bit of light coming from someone can really do a lot. And I thank Allah over and over again that we are given the time, we are here in this time to be able to share that with the young Minister Farrakhan. That's where I'm at.
I thank the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for giving that to us to do, which was not a burden, was not an assignment, it was not work. We loved it, we enjoyed it, we had a sense of purpose, and we were happy that day. Yes.
And I say to all of us, to the believers in the Nation of Islam, thank you for helping me with your charity that allows me to be charitable to many. And I thank you so very much, because the enemy would have loved to cut off my blessings, but he just can't reach heaven.
Bismillah. On this day, 42 years ago, May 11th, 1981, the great Bob Marley died in Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Miami, Florida, of a metastatic brain tumor. In 1977, he was diagnosed with acral lentiginous melanoma, a rare form of skin cancer, after developing a wound in his big right toe. Marley's melanoma was unusually aggressive. By 1981, it had reportedly spread to his vital organs, including his liver, throughout both of his lungs and his brain. A doctor at the world-famous Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in Manhattan, New York, where Bob Marley's brain cancer was discovered, told Bob that he had more cancer inside of him than he had ever seen in a live human being. That's saying a lot. He's a dead man walking, the doctor said. And then, 8 months later, our brother was dead. There are legitimate questions here. Why was Bob's melanoma so unusually aggressive, defying the normal behavior of that cancer? How did he even get it? Melanomas are typically found in whites who are 65 years old and older. How did the young, healthy, mildly melanated Bob Marley get the disease? We are told that a recurring toe injury is the source. But as forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Hunter admitted, melanomas don't act like that. Melanoma does not arise from injuries or scar tissue. When Bob asked his mother, Cedella Marley Booker, "Why would Jah give me cancer? I never do anybody any wrong," she could only assure her son, "Who Jah loveth, he chastiseth." Did Jah give Bob Marley cancer? Or did an enemy give this Che Guevara of popular culture the disease that will ultimately take his life? Professor Fred Zindi, director of the Human Resources Research Center at the University of Zimbabwe in Harare, and music and Bob Marley scholar, reported in 2015, quote, "It is claimed that the CIA artificially induced cancer in Bob Marley's toe. Surviving a failed attempt on his life by a well-armed death squad at his 56 Hope Road home in Kingston, Jamaica, Bob was later given a gift of a new pair of boots by Carl Colby, son of the late CIA director William Colby. When the unsuspecting Marley put them on, something pricked his foot. He then reached into one of the boots and pulled a piece of copper wire. Coincidentally, That same toe later became the source of malignant cancer that spread throughout his body, killing him. Many of his closest friends suspected that the wire contained some carcinogenic substance or cancer-causing substance, since Marley contracted cancer shortly thereafter. Professor Zindi goes on, quote, "To our mind, it is absolutely plausible and extremely likely that cancer can be artificially induced in a specific target. Certainly, we must realize that the causes, the mechanism of how various pollutants cause cancer has been studied and understood with some of the billions and billions of research monies devoted to cancer over the past 100 years. In fact, many believe that is exactly how Bob Marley died. Cancer was inflicted through his toe. The only thing you have to entertain is whether you think it is possible, whether the technological understanding exists, whether the malice exists to give someone cancer, and whether you think it was possible to do those things in the 1970s." End quote. Cancer artificially induced in Bob Marley? Certainly, this is an explosive claim. However, we have now overwhelmingly shown that both the technological understanding and capability to artificially induce cancer in a target and the malice to do so absolutely existed at the time of Bob Marley's death. The assassination apparatuses of both the U.S. and Israel, two longtime partners in crime, have perfected the science and the techniques of death by natural causes, the silent or low signature kill operation that ensures plausible deniability. Artificially inducing cancer is a low signature kill that both countries have mastered, we show in our new work. Professor Zindi's explosive but eminently credible remarks were made in 2015. 2 years later, the incredible and indeed discreditable site yournewswire.com published an eyebrow-raising article entitled "CIA Agent Confesses on Deathbed, I Killed Bob Marley." The author of the article claims that a retired 29-year operative of the CIA was admitted on November 27, 2017 to Mercy Hospital in Maine and, on his deathbed, confessed to having committed 17 political assassinations on behalf of the agency, including that of Bob Marley. The CIA operative, named Bill Oxley and pictured in his hospital bed with a breathing tube in his nose, claimed that he injected Bob Marley with cancer in the same way that Professor Zindi described in 2015. The story got significant traction. In 2018, rappers T.I. and Busta Rhymes both shared the story on their social media platforms. The rappers were roundly criticized in the media for allegedly spreading a debunked conspiracy theory to their millions of followers. But we can defend our brothers T.I. and Busta Rhymes' support of the claim that Bob Marley was killed and the CIA was involved. We have documented that there was tremendous support for this claim. Nevertheless, it is indeed the case that the Your Newswire article is completely bogus, and it has been successfully debunked. The author of this article included extensive quotes from the alleged CIA operative dying in Maine, but the article did not provide a source for the quotations or for the story. The writer doesn't say where he's getting his information from. Was he at Bill Oxley's bedside himself, Or did he hear the story secondhand? If the latter, by whom? We are never told. This was the first indication that this article is bogus. In addition, no evidence of Bill Oxley within association with the CIA could be found, and Mercy Hospital had no record of such a patient. Most damning, the image of the white-haired gentleman in a hospital bed that accompanies the unsourced article, supposedly a picture of the confessing Bill Oxley in Maine, is actually an edited stock photo taken in Poland. This article was easily discredited, but to me, it was too easily discredited. This suggests to me that the article was a piece of disinformation put out as part of an intelligence operation. I strongly suspect that the whole point of this bogus and easily debunked article of the confessing operative was to discredit the strongly supported story of the CIA's actual involvement in the demise of the much beloved Bob Marley. By easily showing the public that the article is bogus, the public became easily convinced that the underlying story is equally bogus. And that simply is not so. Professor Zindi concluded above, quote, "The only thing you have to entertain is whether you think it is possible, whether the technological understanding exists, whether the malice exists to give someone cancer, and whether you think it was possible to do those things in the 1970s. The answers to these questions, we have shown with overwhelming evidence, are yes, 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 and yes. During an episode of the documentary series, Autopsy, The Last Hours of Bob Marley, which aired on Reels TV on February 25th, 2017, forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Hunter asked the question, did the CIA kill Bob Marley with a toxic copper wire? He goes on to answer in the negative. In our new book, we demonstrate that an affirmative answer to this question is justified. Since the close of World War II, the U.S. has had in place an assassination apparatus, what author William Bloom calls a decapitation squad, operated by the CIA. The purpose of this decapitation squad is killing heads of state and others. It was referred to by former President Lyndon Baines Johnson as Murder, Inc., and he implied that it was involved in killing his predecessor, President John F. Kennedy. A declassified 1953 CIA file entitled A Study of Assassination is a 19-page training manual or how-to guidebook in the art of political killing. It outlines techniques to efficiently carry out such decapitations and offers detailed descriptions of the procedures, instruments, and implementation of assassination. Quote, killing a political leader whose burgeoning career is a clear and present danger to the cause of freedom may be held necessary, the document admonishes. Persons who are morally squeamish should not attempt, end quote. The targets of these decapitation operations are those persons who threaten the U.S.'s freedom to pursue her capitalist and neo-colonial ambitions in third world nations. This manual was used during Operation PB Success, which involved the overthrow of the democratically elected Guatemalan government of President Jacobo Arbenz in 1954 and the installation of the military dictatorship of Carlos Castillo Armas. a study of assassination was distributed to CIA agents and operatives. Retired Air Force General Colonel Fletcher Prouty, who was Chief of Special Operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the Kennedy years and provided support for clandestine CIA operations from 1955 to 1964, tells us that unlimited times this government-sponsored murder capability was deployed quickly, cleanly, and with precision against persons deemed enemies of U.S. nationalist interests. This documented, systematic CIA assassination program, which was requested by the White House, was codified in 1960 under the code name ZR Rifle. A political assassination carried out under ZR Rifle was euphemized by the CIA as an, quote, executive action. Bill Harvey, known as the CIA's loaded gun, ran ZR Rifle. He liked loud and dramatic assassinations. The killing of President John Kennedy was an executive action. It involved luring the sitting president into a military-style ambush at 12:30 in the afternoon and blowing his head off in a crossfire before hundreds of witnesses. On the other hand, the CIA executed a different type of assassination as well, a so-called silent operation, also called a low signature assassination because the operation cannot be traced back to its source. As Israeli investigative journalist and author Ronan Birdman describes the benefits of this low signature operation, quote, the killing could not cause a commotion, could not draw attention to the assassination, and ideally would make it look like the target had died of natural causes, end quote. The weapons for these silent assassinations were the responsibility of a special group within the U.S. government. In 1952, the U.S. Army Chemical Corps' Special Operations Division, SOD, partnered with the Technical Services Staff, TSS, of the CIA in a joint project called MK Naomi, the aim of which was the development of chemical, biological agents and their delivery systems for operational use. The Army would produce the agents and the CIA would operationalize them. MK Naomi was a secret $3 million project. Twice a year, the SOD and TSS men who collaborated on MK Naomi held planning sessions at a remote site where they could brainstorm without interruption. The scientist most responsible for providing the means and methods for these low-signature political assassinations was Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, known as the agency's poisoner-in-chief. Born in 1918 in New York to Jewish immigrants from Hungary and raised in an Orthodox Jewish home, Gottlieb has been described as Dr. Death himself. He is reportedly the author of the 1953 CIA Assassination Manual. This manual explicitly recommends medical murder as an easy and effective low-signature assassination. On page 10 of the transcription of this document, we read, quote, in all types of assassinations except terroristic, drugs can be very effective. If the assassin is trained as a doctor or a nurse and the subject is under medical care, this is an easy and rare method, end quote. In other words, kill a target with a drug or poison that is clandestinely administered to him by a doctor or a nurse under whose medical care the target happens to be. This medical skullduggery is a modus operandi of the CIA and of Israel's Mossad. In 1960, Sidney Gottlieb established within the CIA the appropriately named Health Alteration Committee, an internal committee of chemists who looked for unique and plausibly deniable methods of assassinating foreign leaders. The CIA's Health Alteration Committee, or HAC, interfaced with the Army's SOD scientists on many projects and passed on proposals involving the operational use of drugs, chemicals, and biological agents. The HAC's medicine chest at Fort Detrick contained biological agents that could cause diseases such as smallpox, tuberculosis, as well as organic toxins such as snake venom and paralytic shellfish poison. When the CIA's Near East Division targeted Iraqi Colonel Fadil Abbas Mahdawi in February 1960 for incapacitation, they turned to the Health Alteration Committee. As a result, Gottlieb delivered a monogrammed handkerchief to be presented to the Iraqi colonel as a gift. It contained weaponized tuberculosis. Likewise, in April 1963, the CIA planned to gift Cuban leader Fidel Castro with a scuba diving suit contaminated with Madura foot fungus and tuberculosis bacteria. The CIA knew that Castro was a scuba diving enthusiast. These cases illustrate a particular modus operandi of the CIA. Find out the particular love or passion of the target and exploit it with a Trojan gift, like Bob Marley's love for the game of soccer. In addition to tuberculosis, one of the very first biological agents MK Naomi scientists began to weaponize was cancer. As one declassified 1952 CIA memorandum asks, quote, how to knock off key guys? Answer, natural causes. Method, produce cancer. This fact was confirmed by CIA documents made available per the Freedom of Information Act to the San Francisco Chronicle and discussed in an important 1979 article. Quote, at the height of the Cold War, the Central Intelligence Agency looked into ways to, quote, knock off key guys through such natural causes as cancer and heart attack. It was disclosed yesterday. Heavily censored CIA documents from a quarter century ago show the agency even considered performing experiments on terminal cancer patients under the guise of legitimate medical work, end quote. For the whole of 20 years before Bob Marley was diagnosed with cancer in his right big toe in 1977, the U.S. had labored to master the techniques of both chemical carcinogenesis and viral oncogenesis. MK Naomi initially focused on cancer-causing chemicals, such as beryllium and methylcholinthrine. Soon, the agency concentrated on cancer-causing viruses. By 1965, MK Naomi was studying the aerosol transmission, airborne transmission of cancer viruses. During this time, over 600 patients and prisoners, over half of them black, were deliberately injected with cancer cells with the aim of inducing various forms of cancer in these human guinea pigs. These cancer injection experiments were funded by the U.S. government. As a result, Ludwig Gross from the Cancer Research Unit of the Veterans Administration Hospital in Bronx, New York, could warn in 1971, quote, human cancer extracts and also human cell suspensions have been inoculated in recent years by several investigators into patients, including healthy volunteers, in experimental immunologic studies. Inoculation of humans with live cancer cell extracts may lead to the establishment of progressively growing tumors in the recipients and cause dissemination of a fatal disease, end quote. That warning was in 1971, 6 years before Bob Marley contracted cancer. When the U.S. Army's Biowarfare Center at Fort Detrick, Maryland, was converted in 1971-1972 to the civilian Frederick Cancer Research Center, biowarfare research was conducted under the guise of cancer research. In 1975, government-funded scientists succeeded in combining the outer coat of an infectious but non-cancerous baboon virus with the inner core of a non-infectious but cancerous mouse virus, thus producing an infectious pseudovirus with extraordinary characteristics, such as the ability to cause cancer in a wide range of previously non-susceptible animal species, as well as in human cells. This marine baboon hybrid was nothing less than a super cancer virus of its day. Lawrence Loeb and Kenneth Tardoff therefore sounded the alarm in 1976. Quote, it has been clearly demonstrated in all animal species that viruses manufactured in a laboratory can be oncogenic, cancer-causing, end quote. By 1977, the Virus Cancer Project at Fort Detrick was producing 60,000 liters of various cancer-causing viruses and immunosuppressive viruses. Most significantly for our focus, the CIA succeeded in 1963 in creating an assassination cancer. A week after Attorney General Robert Kennedy green-lighted the assassination of Fidel Castro on March 23, 1962, the CIA initiated a biomedical assassination plot against the Cuban leader. The plot was based in New Orleans and involved a project to create an enhanced assassination cancer, an SV40 cancer virus mutated by radiation which, when injected into a target, he will over the course of time develop a galloping cancer and die. A protocol was developed to ensure the effective use of the bioweapon. Due to logistical difficulties, this assassination cancer was never tested on Castro in 1963 as intended. However, it was successfully tested on several human guinea pigs that year, prisoners from Louisiana's Angola State Penitentiary. It was successfully executed against Jack Ruby, the assassin of Lee Harvey Oswald, who died of a galloping cancer in 1967. According to one investigator, this early version of assassination cancer could have been stored indefinitely at the temperature of liquid nitrogen and brought back into tissue cultures at any time, as potent as ever, to be operationalized. Israel, America's assassination partner, was by the 1970s killing her enemies with a chemical weapon that the Mossad called the potion of the gods. It created a leukemia-like condition in the target. The target's autopsy would say he died of a blood cancer. By Bob Marley's day, the CIA had developed a special delivery mechanism for this assassination cancer, described as a, quote, non-discernible microbiologulator. Now that's a mouthful. Non-discernible microbiologulator. That is a tiny micro inoculator or syringe that will inoculate or inject a biological agent into a target in a non-discernible manner. The target would not know that he was just injected with cancer. On September 16, 1975, the Senate Select Committee hearing chaired by Idaho Senator Frank Church discussed with CIA Director William Colby the agency's unauthorized storage of toxic agents. At a certain moment during the hearing, Senator Church asked Director Colby if he had brought anything with him, at which point Colby's assistant produced a top-secret CIA weapon from out of a bag on the floor and handed it to Senator Church. It was a black pistol with a scope attached to the top. While it looked conventional enough, this weapon was actually an illustration of what has been described as the CIA's state-of-the-art technology of murder. This was an example of the CIA's infamous non-discernible microbiologulator, resembling a modified Colt 45 pistol equipped with a fat telescopic sight and an electrical firing mechanism. The gun was adapted to silently fire a special dart, which actually was a special type of poison frozen into the shape of a dart and then fired at high speed from this modified pistol. The dart is tiny or micro, the width of a human hair and 1/4 of an inch long. The dart gun was capable of shooting the icy projectile with enough speed that it penetrated the target's clothing and his skin. The dart then dissolves and the poison is absorbed into the bloodstream, causing a heart attack and leaving no trace. Or the dart can be coated with a cancer-causing agent that, when absorbed into the bloodstream, causes a galloping cancer in the target. This modified pistol has thus been called a heart attack and cancer gun. The hair-width micro dart carrying the poison is actually the inoculator or flying syringe. The small copper wire in Bob Marley's gifted shoe was likely a microbiologulator as well. The evidence is strong and convincing that assassination cancer was the cause of death of several cultural and political figures, including the 2013 death of Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, who was hated by the U.S. government. Chavez died of an abnormally aggressive cancer that months of chemotherapy and radiation failed to tame. Chavez's cancer broke with all the typical characteristics of the disease, as did Bob Marley's. In the wake of Chavez's death, the Venezuelan government established a special commission of international scientists to scientifically investigate if Chavez was poisoned. Biopsy samples were sent to specialized laboratories in Brazil, China, Russia, and, under an assumed name, to the United States. The results showed that Chavez's was an extremely aggressive, unknown cancer. By 2022, governments were announcing the results of the Venezuelan scientific investigation into the death of Hugo Chavez. On August 4th, 2022, in the midst of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, chief of the radiological, chemical, and biological defense troops of the Russian armed forces, issued a briefing at a press conference outlining threats related to the activities of U.S. biological facilities in the region. At the conclusion of his briefing, Lieutenant General Kirilov declared that the biological activity of the U.S. is linked to the death of former President Hugo Chavez, that he was poisoned with a special carcinogenic substance. This Russian Ministry of Defense representative announced, quote, "In violation of international law, the United States has been involved in the development of drugs that, when administered in the short term, cause chronic disease and develop various forms of cancer." Lieutenant General Kirilov stressed that the forensic examination of Hugo Chavez's death evidenced the atypical course of the cancer, and its resistance to the application of drugs corroborates the cause-effect relationship between the death of the former Venezuelan leader and developments in the field of biological weapons by Washington, D.C. Between the assassination by cancer of Jack Ruby in 1967 and the likely assassination by cancer of President Hugo Chavez in 2013, there lies the questionable death by cancer of Bob Marley. Why would the CIA want to assassinate a reggae singer? It is because Bob Marley was much, much more than a reggae singer. After 453 years as a colony, first of Spain and then of the British Empire, the Caribbean island of Jamaica gained independence in 1962. Jamaica's first independent government was led by the conservative Jamaica Labour Party, JLP. This pleased the United States, who felt that under JLP rule, this island on its doorstep was a safe and ideologically aligned ally, contra that other Caribbean ally or Caribbean island, i.e. Cuba, who was no ally of the United States. This all changed in 1972, when Michael Manley and his left-leaning People's National Party, PNP, won the election. In 1974, Prime Minister Michael Manley stirred the hornet's nest by announcing a policy of democratic socialism. Manley developed a relationship with Cuba's Fidel Castro, and he supported Angola's nationalist movement, the Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola, MPLA, against whom the U.S. was waging at that time a covert war. Michael Manley's leftist moves turned Jamaica into one of the primary Cold War battlegrounds and placed the island country firmly in the crosshairs of American covert operations. The JLP's Edward Seaga emerged as the reactionary right-wing opposition determined to steer Jamaica on a more U.S.-friendly course. The U.S. embraced Seaga with predictable fervor, and the American eagle hovered fiercely over Jamaica's doomed experiment in democratic socialism, and eventually routed it with the same methods the State Department and the Central Intelligence Agency had used elsewhere. It appears that Bob Marley was Jamaica's most famous casualty of this Cold War. Michael Manley's administration ruffled other feathers as well. Previously, Jamaica was not open to the Nation of Islam. Manley's predecessor, Prime Minister Hugh Shearer, not only banned Nation of Islam meetings as well as distribution of the newspaper Muhammad Speaks, but Shearer rejected the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his delegation when their plane landed on the island. Michael Manley's election opened Jamaica's doors to the Nation of Islam. In December 1974, Prime Minister Manley hosted a Muhammad Ali Day, and NOI National Representative Minister Louis Farrakhan delivered the keynote address to 25,000 people at the National Stadium. At this time, Jamaica was ruled by an oligarchy of 21 families, a disproportionate number of which were Jewish. Under Michael Manley, Jews fled the island, taking their wealth with them. One of Jamaica's Jews, a scion of one of the ruling 21 families, was Chris Blackwell, the founder of Island Records and Bob Marley's label head. In December 1975, U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger traveled to Jamaica to deliver an ultimatum to Prime Minister Manley: abandon his policies of socialism and break off relations with Angola's MPLA and with Castro's Cuba. Manley refused, and Kissinger grimaced. By the end of that month, Kissinger had expanded and activated the CIA station in Jamaica, which was housed in the U.S. Embassy in Kingston. The CIA launched a massive, punitive, bloody destabilization campaign on the island intended to oust the Manley government. The CIA armed, trained, and funded Edward Seaga's JLP men and organized violent upheavals that killed, maimed, and traumatized the island's mainly poor black population. The CIA plotted the overthrow of the Manley government and the assassination of Michael Manley himself. Both Philip Agee and John Stockwell, two former ranking CIA agents who went public, confirmed this destabilization operation against Manley's government, and they confirmed the agency's role behind the never-before-seen political violence and bloodshed on the island. The operational alliance between the CIA and Edward Seaga's JLP was so close and so widely known that his nickname, C.I.AGA, was painted on gully walls in the ghetto streets of Jamaica. Out of this CIA-JLP alliance came the notorious Jamaican gang called the Shower Posse that wreaked murder, violence, and drug running in the Caribbean, North America, and Europe, all with the assistance of the CIA and the U.S. government. The CIA armed the Shower Posse, trained them in clandestine murder tactics, and funded and facilitated their international drug running. One of the founders of the Shower Posse, Lester Jim Brown Coke, the father of the notorious Christopher Dukes Coke, was one of Edward Seaga's bodyguards and political enforcers. Jim Brown and his posse received secret U.S. training to fight political wars for the JLP, including the murder of leftist opponents of Edward Seaga. CIA agents taught them how to kill with as little as the springs of a wristwatch. This is the backdrop for and the context of the CIA's operation against native son Bob Marley, who was more to Jamaica than its biggest superstar. Declassified CIA and State Department documents confirm that the CIA considered Bob Marley a subversive. Why? At one point, the U.S. Embassy in Kingston, where the CIA station was based, summoned Chris Blackwell to his offices and told him that his artist, Bob Marley, was being watched because he, quote, was capable of inciting young people and of destabilizing. That's ironic. What was Mr. One Love capable of destabilizing? In fact, Bob Marley showed himself capable of destabilizing the CIA's own destabilization operation ongoing in Jamaica at the time. By 1976, according to the New York Times, Marley's popularity and influence eclipsed that of the government. In addition, he had revolutionary appeal on an international scale. The press described him as a hero to the down-pressed of the Third World. Marley had become a lodestar for armed struggle across the globe, from Southeast Asia to the Pacific and to West Africa. In the late 1970s, Nicaraguan Marxist Leninist insurgents, the Sandinista National Liberation Front, reportedly listened to Bob Marley's music before going into combat with the U.S.-funded Contras. In 1975, Marley was an inspiration to East Timor rebels resisting Indonesian military occupation. Marley's songs were listened to with reverence on transistor wireless radio in the guerrilla camps in Mozambique during the final months of the Zimbabwe War of Liberation. Marley's 1979 track Zimbabwe, which praised communist guerrillas fighting to end white minority rule in Rhodesia, lifted the militants' morale. Bob Marley's revolutionary appeal was indeed destabilizing to the many counter-revolutionary operations that the U.S. was running in the so-called Third World. This is why the CIA considered this ambassador of love and peace as subversive. In April 1978, Bob headlined the One Love Peace Concert at Kingston's National Stadium, which attracted 30,000 people. The aim was to celebrate and support a truce that had recently been entered into by the goons of the JLP and the goons of the PNP, thereby offering peace in the streets. The highlight of this concert was Bob calling to the stage and clasping hands with Prime Minister Michael Manley and opposition leader Edward Seaga. Everyone saw this as a breakthrough for peace. But it was all a mirage, because the One Love Peace Concert was used as a cover to smuggle CIA-supplied weapons to Seaga's forces. The guns were hidden inside lightning equipment shipments, and Seaga's men used them to fan the flames of the Civil War. Hundreds would be killed or injured by those very weapons. Bob was believed to have the power to sway national elections. Thus, both Manley's PNP and Seaga's JLP courted Bob, trying to use his influence to their political advantage. Bob did his best to stay politically neutral, but Michael Manley maneuvered Bob in his December 5th, 1976 Smile Jamaica concert in such a way that it appeared as though Bob and his concert were in support of the PNP. As a consequence, political goons associated with Seaga's CIA-supported JLP warned Bob not to do the concert. When it was clear that Bob would proceed with the Sunday event, he was targeted on that previous Friday. Because of the frequent warnings and threats against Bob's life leading up to the concert, 24-hour protection was arranged for his home studio at 56 Hope Road. Called the Echo Squad, This protection was a loose confederation of gang members from both political parties, as well as protective services men assigned to Bob by the Prime Minister's office. With automatic rifles, the Echo Squad stood round-the-clock guard, allowing no one but members of Bob's band on or off the premises without permission. Bob was well protected until, on cue, his entire protective detail abandoned him. At around 8:35 p.m., all of the security mysteriously disappeared from their posts, leaving the home completely unguarded. Suddenly, two white Datsuns barreled through the iron gates enclosing 56 Hope Road. A 7-man hit team surrounded the house and peppered it with a barrage of rifle and pistol fire. Rita Marley, Bob's wife, was shot and a bullet caught her between the scalp and skull, lifting her off her feet. Band member Lewis Griffiths took 2 bullets in his stomach. In the kitchen pantry, a gunman got off 8 shots, 5 of which tore into Bob's manager, Don Taylor, who happened to be standing right in front of Bob. He took the brunt of the assault. 1 bullet creased Marley's breast below his heart and drilled deep inside his arm. Despite the heavy gunfire, by the grace of Jah, who is Allah, everyone survived the attack. We now know for sure that this ambush was part of the CIA's destabilization operation it was running in Jamaica at the time. The shooters were from the CIA-backed JLP. The 2 leaders of the ambush, it is reported, were Edward Seaga's personal bodyguard, Lester Jim Brown Coke, and JLP gunman Carl B. Mitchell. Mitchell later revealed that the CIA contracted him to organize the hit on Bob Marley. In the summer of 1977, when Prime Minister Michael Manley visited London while Bob Marley was staying there in self-exile, the Prime Minister requested Bob and his manager, Don Taylor, meet him at the Jamaican Embassy in Kensington Gore, central London. The Prime Minister told Bob and Don that he knew for certain that responsibility for the shooting lay directly with the CIA, and that he was sure that Bob Marley would want to know the true cause and reason behind the shooting. It was in the same year that the U.S. Embassy in Jamaica summoned Chris Blackwell and let him know that the CIA considered Bob Marley a subversive, destabilizing force who was capable of inciting young people. The One Love Peace concert, which was hijacked by the CIA to smuggle weapons into Jamaica, occurred in April 1978. That summer in June, on a bright Wednesday afternoon, Bob Marley and his manager, Don Taylor, who was most severely injured in the ambush, were taken by a JLP thug named Tech Life to a Kingston ghetto called McGregor Gully, where a hood court was in session and ghetto justice was being executed. 3 men were tied and bound, one of which, named Lego Beast, told the ghetto court that he and 3 other members of the ambush team had been trained by the CIA and given guns and an unlimited supply of cocaine to pull off the ambush and assassination of Bob Marley. According to Don Taylor, who recounts the story himself, 2 of the men were hanged and 1 was shot in the head in front of Bob Marley, who was offered the opportunity to personally carry out the executions. He, Bob, unemotionally declined, according to Don Taylor. After Bob left the hospital Friday evening, he was taken into hiding at Strawberry Hill, a secluded retreat in the peaks of the Blue Mountains overlooking Kingston. It was owned by Chris Blackwell. Only a select few of Marley's most trusted comrades knew his location. The next day, Saturday, a film crew from New York, hired by Blackwell, arrived at Strawberry Hill. One of the film crew, a cameraman, arrived in Jamaica under an alias. No one at the time knew that his real name was Carl Colby. Carl Colby was the son of former CIA Director William Colby, known as the quintessential gray man, which is an intelligence term describing the ideal spy who can hide in plain sight. The gray man is so inconspicuous that he can never catch the waiter's eye in the restaurant. That was the skill of William Colby, which he honed over 25 years with the CIA. He is the architect of the agency's dirtiest tricks, and he pioneered U.S. counterinsurgency warfare. The most important detail about William Colby, for our purposes, is this. During the September 16, 1975 Church Committee hearing, it was Bill Colby who presented the CIA's top secret weapon, the infamous non-discernible microbio inoculator, and explained it to Senator Church. As we saw above, this microbio inoculator is capable of firing a special non-discernible dart at a target that could either cause an instant heart attack or cause cancer if coated with a carcinogenic substance. It was Bill Colby who presented this weapon to Congress in 1975 and explained it to them, a year before his son arrived under an alias at Bob Marley's hiding place on Strawberry Hill and presented Bob with a pair of soccer cleats that had a mysterious copper wire in them that pricked Bob's toe, the very toe that would develop cancer months later. In November 1975, President Gerald Ford replaced Colby as Director of Central Intelligence with George H.W. Bush. However, Colby stayed on until January 1976. In any case, Bill Colby's departure from the CIA in January 1976 was a mere formality. As the motto goes, once CIA, always CIA. And William Colby personified that motto. He never left the intelligence community. As late as 1978, George Bush and his successor, Admiral Stansfield Turner, brought Colby back to help train the new recruits, and Director Bush would call Colby to, quote, pick his brain. This was over a year after the attempted assassination of Bob Marley. Bill Colby never left the world of clandestine and covert operations, and the whole Jamaica destabilization op has the contours of Bill Colby's profile. It was this man's son, Carl Colby, who arrived in Jamaica under an alias and infiltrated the film crew who filmed Bob Marley at Strawberry Hill, where he was hiding out after the failed CIA-organized assassination attempt the night before. On Sunday, December 5th, the night of the Smile Jamaica concert, Carl Colby returned to Strawberry Hill, this time without his camera. Instead, he had with him a pair of soccer boots, which he intended to gift to Bob Marley, who was a soccer enthusiast. Music and football, or soccer, were his twin passions. According to a number of persons present, including Oscar-winning cinematographer Lee Lu Lee, as well as Bob Marley's personal physician, Dr. Carlton Frazier, Marley was given the shoes. He tried them on, and when he did, a small copper wire embedded in the right shoe poked the artist in his big toe. Bob said, "Ouch," and pulled the wire out. It was that very toe that, around 6 months later, in the summer of 1977, was diagnosed with malignant melanoma. As an avid soccer player, Bob suffered occasional foot injuries throughout the years, including an injury to that very toe. These prior injuries always healed on their own. After the prick by the copper wire in the CIA-gifted soccer boots at Strawberry Hill, things took a different turn. When he injured the toe during a soccer game in Paris in May 1977, instead of healing, it degenerated. Melanoma does not arise from injuries or scar tissue, so none of his soccer injuries could be the cause of Bob Marley's cancer. On the other hand, the suspected murder by cancer operation that targeted Bob Marley on Sunday, December 5th, 1976, possessed all of the hallmarks of a traditional CIA operation. 1. Toxic gifts. The CIA tried to exploit Fidel Castro's known indulgences with poisoned gifts. They wanted to kill the Cuban leader through his love of cigars, so they prepared boxes of his favorite brand packed with explosives and laced with botulinum toxin. The weaponized cigars were to be given to Castro as gifts by a cooperating New York police officer who was responsible for the leader's security while he visited the city. The agency also wanted to kill Castro through his love of scuba diving, so they plotted to poison him with a diving suit that would be presented to him as a gift. The suit would be contaminated with Maduro foot fungus and tuberculosis. It is well known that Bob Marley's two passions were music and football or soccer. Whenever he was not doing one, he was doing the other. Thus, the circumstance that the CIA exploited Marley's love for soccer to kill him with a Trojan horse gift of football sneakers that were contaminated in some way with a toxin is standard agency modus operandi. Weaponizing a target's shoes is also agency MO. The CIA planned to dust Castro's shoes with the toxin thallium when he put them outside his hotel room door to be shined. 2. Microbio-inoculators. If the small copper wire embedded in the soccer shoe that Bob Marley put on was treated with a carcinogenic toxin, then the wire served as a microbio-inoculator, inoculating Bob's foot with the biological substance. This is consistent with CIA MO also. For example, the CIA prepared a Papermate ballpoint pen for a Castro job. The Papermate was outfitted with a tiny needle, a makeshift hypodermic syringe that, with a non-discernible poke, can deliver the toxin Black Leaf 40 into its victim, Castro. The hidden needle is a microbio-inoculator. Most famous, of course, is the dart. For the dart gun presented by or to the church committee by Bill Cosby himself. The ammunition was a poison frozen into a tiny quarter-inch dart the width of a human head. This dart is a non-discernible flying syringe, a microbio-inoculator that can deliver a carcinogenic toxin. The tiny needle, the frozen dart, and the copper wire are all microbio-inoculators. 3. Kill team disguised as film crew. The claim is that the film crew from New York, hired by Chris Blackwell to film the Smile Jamaica concert, actually consisted of a kill team led by Carl Colby, son of the architect of the CIA's dirtiest tricks, former director Bill Colby. Posing as a camera crew, the assassins were able to get close to the target to deliver the poisoned gift of football sneakers. This is consistent with a planned CIA operation 5 years earlier to kill Castro during his state visit to Chile in December 1971. The assassins will pose as a film crew equipped with counterfeit press credentials, allowing them to infiltrate a press conference with cameras containing a camouflaged gun to kill the visiting leader. All of this indicates that the suggested murder by cancer operation that targeted Marley on Sunday, December 5th, 1976, possessed all of the hallmarks of a traditional CIA operation. The kill team disguised as a film crew, exploiting the target's known love, soccer, with a Trojan horse gift, soccer cleats, the use of a microbial inoculator, the copper wire, and the gifted shoes to deliver the lethal toxin, a carcinogenic substance. These events of Sunday, December 5th at Strawberry Hill, must surely be seen in the context of the events of Friday, December 3rd at 56 Hope Road, the CIA-organized shooting of Bob Marley. The CIA's known involvement in Friday's failed assassination attempt makes the charge of a second CIA-involved assassination attempt on Sunday, a biological assassination attempt, eminently credible. Instead of amputating the cancerous toe, Bob Marley opted for a surgical excision to cut away the cancerous tissue and a skin graft. This was done at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, now University of Miami Hospital, by Dr. William Bacon, a renowned black orthopedic surgeon. The surgery was reported as a tremendous success. Bob's close friends say his toe healed beautifully, and he was able to play hard soccer for 2 years afterwards with no issue. At the start of the U.S. leg of the tour for his Uprising album in September 1980, Bob passed a medical exam and a doctor cleared him to perform, even though, in fact, by that time Bob started to not feel well and was not in the best health condition for such a strenuous tour. Before the tour, Bob started to have strange maladies, such as headaches and nosebleeds, according to Dr. Carlton Frazier, Bob's personal physician. So he and others were shocked that a U.S. doctor cleared Bob to tour. Their suspicions were soon proven correct in New York. During a Madison Square Garden performance on September 19, 1980, Bob Marley fell ill and almost fainted, causing him to cut short the show. The next morning, while jogging through Central Park, Bob Marley suffered a stroke and collapsed with a seizure. His team rushed him to Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in Manhattan, where a neurological exam showed brain cancer. In addition, doctors found that Bob had cancer in his liver and in both of his lungs. Bob was in fact suffering from a galloping cancer. The doctors advised that he only had 3 weeks to live. Yet a medical exam missed all of this. And therein lies the mystery. With so much cancer in Bob's body, How did doctors pass his medical exam and clear him for the tour? One of the doctors that treated Bob probably gives us the answer to this mystery. Prominent Bahamian doctor, Dr. Philip Thompson of the University of the West Indies in St. Andrew, has said that some highly connected people tried to coerce him, Dr. Thompson, into ceasing his treatment of Bob Marley. Dr. Thompson says he refused to succumb to their pressure, and Dr. Thompson therefore reportedly believed that Bob was murdered with this illness. It thus cannot be ruled out that any number of the doctors who treated Bob Marley over the years were recruited into the medical conspiracy against him. Remember, the 1953 assassination manual of the CIA declared that medical murder was an easy and an effective low-signature assassination. Kill a target with a drug or poison clandestinely administered to him by a doctor or nurse under whose medical care the target happens to be, and then deny the patient target the appropriate care that would help him. According to Bob's personal physician and close friend, Rastafarian Dr. Carlton Fraser, Bob was cured of the cancer in his toe, which had, he thought, not spread. When he was told in New York, that is Dr. Fraser, when he was told in New York that the cancer had metastasized, Dr. Fraser was incredulous. Quote, "How could this be?" he questioned. There were no medical factors to show how this manifested. We had done all of the technical scans and x-rays to make sure there was no evidence of cancer in his toe, Dr. Fraser exclaimed. Then Dr. Fraser says with certainty, quote, "They definitely know what they did," end quote. Who is they and what did they do? According to Dr. Fraser, they did two things, or they did one thing twice. Dr. Fraser was one of those present on Strawberry Hill on December 5th, 1976, and he witnessed Carl Colby give Bob Marley the soccer shoes, and he witnessed Bob's toe get pricked by the copper wire within the shoe. According to a 2021 interview with the newspaper Jamaica Observer, Dr. Fraser is convinced that Bob's cancer began with that copper wire. However, he believes that the cancer in the toe was caught before it spread, and that after the 1977 surgical excision and during the uprising tour that began May 30th, 1980, Bob was deliberately infected with cancer a second time, Dr. Fraser believes. They know what they did, he says. After the New York doctors gave Bob Marley a death announcement, he and his team sought alternative medical treatment in Bavaria, Germany, under the care of Dr. Joseph Isos. What no one in Bob's team knew at the time is that during World War II, Isos was a Nazi doctor, a protege of the notorious Angel of Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele. Dr. Isos himself was a deep racist, according to Bob's mother, Cedella Marley Booker. In the very first encounter between the Black King of Reggae and the Nazi doctor of Germany, Isos looked Bob up and down, and seeing that Bob was sickly and bald from the chemotherapy, said with disdain to the pitiful figure standing before him, quote, "I hear you're one of the most dangerous black men in the world, but you don't look so dangerous to me," end quote. Isos revealed that the person or persons who alerted him to the fact that Bob was such a dangerous black man advised Isos not to treat him. And while Dr. Isles did ostensibly treat Bob for 6 months, what those who were with Bob in Germany say is that Isles actually tortured Bob Marley rather than treated him. Then Isles told Bob's already grieving mother that her son is going to die, and he literally kicked the dying black king out of his clinic, giving Bob and his party 24 hours to leave Isles' facility. A plane was chartered, and Bob Marley and his loved ones headed for home in Jamaica. But Bob took a turn for the worse while in flight, so the plane landed in Miami, Florida. Bob was rushed to Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, where he died 2 days later. Our conclusion is Bob Marley's cause of death was not natural causes. His cause of death was regicide. Regicide is a word that means the purposeful killing of a king. Bob Nestor Marley was a great soul. Not just a gifted soul, but a soul that yearned for the redemption of his people around the world. He was a Jamaica-born prophet of love and peace, and it is specifically the peace that he labored for that made him a threat. For he labored for peace in the ghettos of Jamaica, areas that bore the greatest brunt of the civil war that U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger and his CIA spawned. Black-on-black political violence was the operational mandate of the CIA's destabilization operation in Jamaica, and Bob Marley's message of black self-love, peace, and unity was an operational threat to the CIA's cause. And totally consumed by its Cold War zeal, the CIA made Bob Marley the most famous Jamaican casualty of the Cold War. May Allah, Jah, be pleased with our dear brother Bob Marley, and may he make his legacy endure forever. Amen.